Good evening, this is Denise Peterson-Rafuse at the Cove. This evening we're going to talk about a very serious issue in our society with respect to women and violence, but we're going to be also talking about hope, the light that shines for us to work together in a restorative manner to eliminate violence in our society, not just for women, but violence in particular. And I am honored that I have a lady who has dedicated herself for most of her life in expressing those views that we need to tackle these issues on a restorative approach and how we can be vocal and educate others on the importance of the challenge of violence. And we're going to be speaking with Sue Bookchin. Sue has been a long-time advocate, and she has worked at the Second Stories Women's Center, also in a major project called Be the Peace Project, which has now turned into Be the Peace Institute. So I would like to say good evening, Sue, and welcome.
Thank you, Denise. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, I'm looking forward to you teaching us this evening and talking about how you got involved with Be the Peace Project and involvement in the Second Story Women's Center and how all this has intertwined together, that recently you have been able to announce that you incorporated an organization to now have Be the Peace Institute, which I think is a marvelous step forward and says a lot for the work that you have done, that you are able to be recognized to have an institute now that's called Be the Peace. So let's start, Sue, with you giving us some background of the work that you've done with the Second Story Women's Center and also your previous work to that, and how we got to the first project called Be the Peace Project.
So Second Story Women's Center in Lunenburg has been a women's resource center for more than 30 years, and I have volunteered with Second Story over the years. I've sat on the board. I've been involved in some social action initiatives, most notably the Making Change initiative, which was one of the big efforts that Second Story did to raise awareness about violence against women. And when the Making Change initiative finished, we noticed that there was a call for proposals by Status of Women Canada to build a coordinated community response to violence against women. And so a bunch of us wrote that proposal, and Second Story was awarded that funding for 3 years. And we did that project, which was really quite an incredible experience for people who were involved in it. And they told us that directly. For instance, we had a public forum over 3 days to which we had 150 people attend.
And that's how you got started, wasn't it? To get the basis of information on how people were thinking about violence against women?
It was very clear that people wanted to talk about this issue, that they no longer wanted it swept under the rug, and that having a vigil once a year for the women killed at École Polytechnique in Montreal was simply not enough. And certainly a lot of people, including all the women's centers and transition houses in Nova Scotia, have worked for decades on this issue. And yet it was a sense of community awareness and community building about how we wanted to grapple with this in some new way so that we could start to make inroads to prevent violence against women. And it was remarkable how many people even disclosed their own victimization in this public forum.
Which is a real difficult thing to do. There must have been a great sense of comfort in the room that anyone would reveal their own experience with violence.
Yeah, people would not do that lightly or easily. And so we were able to build a safe enough container and have a genuine sense of valuing them and their stories that a number of people did disclose. So in that project over 3 years, we worked in schools, we worked with the police, we worked with churches, we did public presentations.
Did you have a geographical area, Sue, that you focused on as a pilot project?
It was really Lunenburg, Queens, and surrounding areas. So we had partners in Halifax, for instance, and it was really anyone who wanted to be involved but most of our activities centered around Lunenburg, Queens counties.
Because you need to have that sort of home base, but it was open to anybody, which was really valuable with the fact that if people wanted to participate and offer their insights. Was there discussion about why we have been so silent for so many generations? Was it a fear factor? Was it feeling that we were exaggerating those violences? Like, what did you get out of Be the Peace project that identified why society has been like that?
There are many. It's a very, very complex topic, and so much of our lives are gender biased in ways that are mostly very unconscious for us. The devaluing of women as sex objects. I mean, if you look at the growth of just online pornography that's available to young people that links sexuality and violence against women is really quite alarming. But for women who have experienced it, there still is a tremendous amount of shame and guilt and blame that they feel all around them, whether it's from family members, from friends, from police officers, through the court system. It's a very, very difficult thing to find yourself in that kind of situation and know where you can go for support and for unbiased support that is not going to traumatize you further.
And was Be the Peace project looking at that? You identified the fact that it is very difficult for women to speak up and know where to go in their community or even outside their community. And as you said, also receive that unbiased support. What did you discover with that particular issue in itself? That where could women go, or the whole idea, I guess we were talking a bit ago before the interview about the fact that lots of times things are said in terms of, oh, we support violence, this whole bit about getting rid of violence against women, we support the equality, but yet it's more of a verbal and there's not this action around it. Is that something you discovered in the project?
Yeah, it was very discouraging to me at one point. I was having a conversation with someone who said, people say they care about women and children, but they really don't. And because our actions are some evidence of that.
And we still see that every day, right?
Yeah. Every day, in every system, in every structure, and this kind of sexist, misogynistic way of seeing people is also related to other forms of oppression like racism and homophobia and ableism and all the ways in which we judge people who we think are less than. We are less than the dominant culture. So we discovered a lot about how could that project be a safe place for people to talk about these things. And of course, we're lucky in Lunenburg County because we have Second Story Women's Center.
Exactly.
We also have a transition house, Harbor House, where anyone can go for advice and support and help, even if they're not going to stay at the shelter. And we also have had a men's intervention program. And plus, we have a family support center. We have the Family Support Association. And so we're really quite lucky here to have those kinds of services for women and for people who want help. But one of the reasons that we applied for the current funding with the Be the Peace Institute was because of how many stories women told about going through the justice system as a particular kind of hell. And some of them even described going through the justice system as worse than the violence that they experienced in their relationship.
Is that right? I think one thing, Sue, that's really important to make note of is when you mention about the men's intervention program. And the reason I want to just touch on that is the fact that often, because we are trying to discuss about violence against women and get that message out, and there's a lot of talk in our society about that, is you have to repeat and you have to talk about it a lot in order for it to finally start to sort of set into people and to educate people. But we can't forget the fact that there's many men that support the Second Story Women's Center. They support women, and they know that in fact if we have a change in society and eliminate that violence against women, it creates equality in all of us, because there's men that feel that there's inequality in their lives too.
Yeah.
And so I think that's an important factor, that we are talking about women this evening, but we also are recognizing the fact that there's many men that feel that they're in places of inequality, whether it's in their work life or maybe even in their personal life. It's that feeling that they're dealing with is the same that the women are dealing with. It's about empowerment, is it not?
I don't know that it's the same, but it's very important to note
recognize
that
it.
Most men are not violent. And we can't just say that men are violent and women are victims and need to be protected. That binary is not useful and it's not accurate. I mean, men are also victims in some ways, but interestingly, what we're finding and what we try to talk with young people about is that gender stereotypes and the ways in which we judge each other as male or female hurts all of us, because it puts boys in boxes about who they can be and confines them to just this notion of what masculinity is supposed to be. And it confines girls in boxes about what femininity is supposed to be. And that's very damaging for all of us. It doesn't allow us to have freedom and equality and be able to choose.
Well, I think that is such an excellent point. We're going to take a break, Sue, but when we come back, I want you to talk to our listeners and let them know about the story that you were telling me about the pink snowsuit. Mm-hmm. It really hits home when you hear the story, and it makes you stop and really think what you're talking about, of the fact that we don't want to put our genders in different boxes, because we don't want those walls around us. We want everybody to have the opportunity to express themselves through who they are, not who society thinks they are or who they should be, but really who we are as an individual. And we need to have that freedom, and that's what you've been dedicated to with Be the Peace Project and now the Be the Peace Institute, is to get rid of those boxes and walls. We're going to take a short little break, and then we're going to come back, and Sue is going to tell us a credible story that's going to make you stop and think. This is Denise Peterson-Rafuse